Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reda with Future Pastimes. Future Pastimes are the designers of the original classic Dune board game from 1979. Now, I'm obviously not one of the original designers because I was 10 years old in 1979, but I am one of the designers on the expansions for the 2019 edition of the classic Dune board game that is published by Guild Force 9. So get those expansions because I think they're pretty great, and I hope that you do as well. But in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about spice dialing, which is used in advanced Dune to calculate your combat strength. And so Dune has a basic mode and an advanced mode, and the basic mode is a perfectly good game. And the way that the dialing works in here is the number that you're dialing are the number of forces you're willing to sacrifice in order to win a battle. So you might have 5 forces in a battle, and you say, I'm willing to sacrifice 4 of these forces. And adding that number that I've dialed to the number of the strength of my leader, and of course the higher total wins. And that's how combat works. And the leader, of course, can be killed because you're playing a weapon in defense if you have them. And if you don't have the proper defense, your leader could be killed. So that their strength won't account. It'll just be what you're dialing. It's a pretty brilliant combat mechanism for board gaming, and there's really nothing else quite like it. It has stood the test of time. It's pretty fantastic. In Advanced Dune, there's a little wrinkle to that, though, and actually what you're dialing is not really force. The force is really kind of a misnomer at that point for advanced dialing, because what you're actually calculating is your force strength. It's not the number of forces you're willing to sacrifice. It's the strength of those forces that you're willing to sacrifice. And that is because the forces themselves are only at half strength unless you spend spice. And you have to spend spice for each force that you want to count at full strength in a given battle. And for some people, that tends to flummox them, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do advanced combat because there's half increments. And I think if you're older than 3, you're probably going to be able to figure out how to do advanced combat in Dune. It's really not that complicated, but I certainly understand. It was something I avoided the first couple of years I was playing Dune. I was like, no, basic is fine. But actually, I think advanced Dune is so much better. It's a much richer, deeper strategy game, and it's far more thematic because in addition to the spice dialing, actually there's a lot of advantages that factions can do in advanced only. There's also an additional spice blow, so there's more spice on the board. Of course, you're going to need some of that spice to pay for your forces in combat. And then there's also the advanced Karama effects, which can be very powerful once per game effects that a faction can use, rather than using the Karama for its printed abilities of getting a free treachery card or half-priced shipping that you pay to the spice bank rather than to the guild. So I really enjoy advanced combat, and advanced Dune is a much better Dune experience overall for me. So you do have to jump into the advanced spice dialing. There's a lot of people who have tried to do some home brew house rules for getting advanced Dune without the spice dialing in the combat, but it just doesn't work. You have to have the total package. You've got to do the spice dialing as well as the advanced advantages. So let's really wrap our heads around the spice dialing. I'll show you what I do. It works for me. Hopefully it'll work for you as well. And then you can really enjoy Dune in its best light. So as I mentioned, your forces are at half strength. And the way I look at it is I tend to think of it in terms of clicks. So for each force that I have in the combat, it's 1 click, which is a half point, okay? But the other thing that I tend to do is I start off by trying to calculate what is my max dial. And max dial is the highest that you can dial, knowing that even if you win the battle, you're going to lose all of your forces. So what is your max dial? And you figure it out with no spice, and then you can apply how it works with spice as well. So let's say that I'm one of the factions that does not have any of the starred forces. And I'll get to the starred forces here in a minute. But let's say you're Atreides. You've got 5 forces in Arrakeen. Your max dial is going to be 5 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Half of 5 is 2.5. So that's your max dial, knowing that you have spent no spice And even if you win, you're going to lose all 5 of those forces. Now, usually what people are going to be trying to calculate is what I like to call the max safe dial. And that is the maximum that you can dial, but still have 1 force left over in that territory. So let's back that up. You've got 5 forces in Arakeen. You want to know what your max safe dial is. So you're going to be giving up 4 forces. That's 4 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Half of 4 is 2. So that's not terribly difficult to figure out. You know that if you spend no spice, that 2 is the maximum safe dial that you can do. And if you win, you'll have 1 force left over. Now, for each spice that you are able to spend, that's another click. It's another half a point. So you're getting a half a point for each force, a half a point for each spice. And naturally, you can't spend more spice than you have forces. So same example. I've got 5 forces in Arakeen. I want to have 1 force left over. Now we look at how much spice am I willing to spend. Well, let's say I'm only willing to spend 2, all right? So I say, all right, I've got 1 force, that's a click, 1 spice, that's a click. 2 force, 2 spice, and now that's 2 forces paid for. I've got 2 more I'm able to sacrifice. So that's my new max safe dial, is a 3. That means that 2 of those points right there are going to be spice and forces, and then 2 more forces gives me another full point for a maximum of 3. So you're getting a little bit more with the dial there, but if you have more spice to spend, that's more clicks that you can apply to that. So I've got 5 forces. I'm willing to sacrifice 4 of them. That gives me 4 clicks, which gets up to 2. I've got 4 more spice. Click, 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 click. That means that all 4 of my forces are at full strength. That's why it's a full 4, 1 force left over. Now, the starred forces, that would be, there's 3 factions with starred forces. The Emperor has the 5 Sardaukar. The Ixian faction has the 7 cyborgs, and the Fremen have the 3 Fedaykin that are their starred forces. But what's interesting about the Fremen is that they actually don't ever need to spend spice to count their forces at full strength. They're always at full strength. So for them, it's like dialing in basic. They've got 5 forces in a territory, and they're willing to sacrifice 4 of them. That's their max safe dial, and they don't have to worry about spending any spice or increments. Now, their Fedaykin count at double strength. So let's say in that same battle, you've got 3 Fedaykin and 1 regular force. You're just trying to figure out which one you want to have left over. And let's say you want to get your highest number, so you're willing to sacrifice all 3 Fedaykin. Well, that's 6 points right there, because each one is worth 2, and you're sacrificing 3 of them. So that's very valuable. And that's one of the reasons why the spice dialing in advanced combat is so important, is because it actually makes the Fremen a much more competitive faction. Now, in the basic game, they're okay. Their advantages are okay. They're not great, but a lot of the other factions in comparison in basic are just a little bit stronger, and they're going to do a little bit better, because some of the other advantages that the Fremen have are pretty situational. So, and in fact, even advanced, some of them are situational. So being able to fight at full strength and not needing the spice makes the Fremen a much more attractive faction to play as in Dune. And the Sardaukar of the Emperor are never double strength against the Fremen. So it doesn't matter what happens. They're always half strength against they count as regular forces against the Fremen. So for the other factions, though, they've got these star tokens. So the Sardaukar, for instance, with the Emperor, they count as double forces, but they still need to spice in order to count at their full strength. So one Sardaukar force would count as a double click. So click, click. That's a Sardaukar with no spice. And if you spend a spice on a Sardaukar, you're getting another double click. So I've spent 1 spice on 1 Sardaukar. That lets me dial 2. I'm going to lose that 1 Sardaukar if I win the battle. So let's take an example of, you're in a situation where you're the Emperor and you have 3 Sardaukar, 3 forces, and 3 spice. Now you have a few things that you can do with that depending on how you want to spend the spice. So let's break it down in a couple of different ways. First of all, let's calculate what your max dial is. First of all, with no spice at all. So click, click for 1 Sardaukar, click, click for 2, click, click for 3. And then I've got 3 regular forces, click, 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 4.5. That's my max dial, which means I will lose all 6 of those forces even if I win the battle. That's my max dial. So now I'm going to back it up and figure out what is my max safe dial. Well, again, you got to figure out which force do you want to have left over. And let's take it in terms of you're trying to get your highest number dials. So you are going to sacrifice those Sardaukar. You're going to have 1 regular force left over. So spending no spice, my max dial, 3 Sardaukar, click, 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 and then 2 regular forces, click, click. 4 is my max safe dial with no spice in a battle where I have 3 Sardaukar and 3 regular forces. Now, if I wanted there to be 1 Sardaukar left over, that means I'm only sacrificing 2 Sardaukar, click, 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 and then 3 regular forces, click, click, click. 3.5 is my max safe dial, and I'll have 1 Sardaukar left over. Now, we'll back it up again. I've got 3 spice that I can spend. Again, you're trying to figure out who's going to be left over. So we're going for our maximum number. So we're going to have 1 force left over. We're going to spend that 3 spice on the Sardaukar. So click, click, 1 Sardaukar, click, click, 1 spice. Click, click, 2 Sardaukar, click, click, 2 spice. Click, click, 3 Sardaukar, click, click, 3 spice. And I've got 2 regular forces, click, click. 7 is my max safe dial in a battle where I've got 3 regular, 3 Sardaukar, and 3 spice to spend. So with the cyborgs, what's interesting is that is actually a basic game advantage. They've got the cyborgs, which count at double strength in basic, and they have the suboids, which count at half strength at basic. And that's actually a pretty good way to get introduced to this concept of half dialing, because if you've got 2 cyborgs and 2 regular or 2 suboids in a battle, well, that's 1 cyborg, that's another cyborg. Your max dial is 5. Your max safe dial is actually 4.5. You'll have 1 suboid left over, which is actually pretty good because you can take that surviving suboid and then send them to the tanks and keep one of the cyborgs that should go to the tanks because that's one of your abilities as the Ixian faction. In advanced, of course, the cyborgs only count at double strength if you have spent a spice for each cyborg. You don't have to spend spice to count the suboids as half because they're always half, even in advanced. So dive in there, give it a try, figure out your max dial, figure out what your max safe dial is. And sometimes you want to have more than 1 force left over. That's just the max safe dial. If you've got 10 forces in Arakeen, you don't necessarily want to be able to dial 9, although maybe you do. And sometimes you even want to do a max dial. Why would you want to do a max dial? Maybe to prevent the win, maybe to make sure that you don't have to discard your treachery cards if you've got a crysknife and a shield. Even if you've lost all of your forces, you want to be able to keep those cards in your hand. And maybe because you are expecting to kill 1 or both of the leaders in that battle and you want to collect the spice for those leaders. If you have Lady Margot and Lady Jessica fighting it out and they both get killed, but you have dialed higher, then you're going to collect 10 spice for those leaders, even if you had to max dial your forces and send them all to the tanks. It sometimes is worth it just for that payday. So, like I said, just practice it a couple of times. Jump in there. It'll be a little bit slow the first time that you're playing it in your first game, but probably only for the first couple of turns, especially if you make sure you're in some battles there. After that, it'll become second nature. Again, the only skills you need to be able to do is count in half increments and being able to double or divide by 2. Those are the 3 skills necessary to do spice dialing. So try it out. Let me know what you think. If you have a way that you have made it click in your head that makes more sense than what I've just described, then by all means share that. I'd love to hear it. I'm always teaching people how to play Dune, and I love to be able to get them playing advanced Dune as quickly as possible. So we do a couple of games of basic, and then it's time for them to do spice dialing and get into the other half of what the Dune board game can really offer you. And let me know if there's other things about Dune that you want to learn or hear about. I'm happy to do more of these videos. And we hope that you enjoy Dune and look forward to hearing from you about any of the other stuff that Future Pastimes has worked on. So thanks for watching.